I need to tell someone what I did, and you're going to hate me for it. But there's something about what happened between Jake and me that nobody understands. Not my friends who all took his side. Not my sister who stopped answering my calls. And definitely not the hundreds of strangers on Reddit who called me every name in the book when Jake posted his version of our breakup. They all think I'm shallow, manipulative, a hypocrite. And maybe I am, but what they don't know is what Jake said to me 3 days after our fight, and what I found on his phone 2 weeks later. That part changes everything, even if it doesn't make me look any better. I'm telling this story because if I don't, I'm going to lose my mind carrying it around alone. My therapist says I need to process what happened, but she charges $200 an hour to nod sympathetically. And I can't afford that anymore. So you get the story instead. Lucky you. And here's the thing I need you to understand before you judge me. This isn't just about body count or double standards or any of that surface level stuff everyone's been arguing about online. This is about the moment I realized that the person I loved most in the world had decided I wasn't worth the effort of honesty. That he'd chosen cruelty so calculated, so perfectly designed to destroy me, that I still wake up at 3 a.m. wondering if I ever knew him at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start with the night it all fell apart. Jake and I had been together for 2 years when he asked me the question. 2 years of what I thought was the healthiest relationship I'd ever had. We were at his apartment, half watching some documentary about ocean life. My feet in his lap, his hand absent-mindedly rubbing my ankle. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd just gotten promoted at work that Monday, and we were still in this bubble of celebrating my success, planning a weekend trip to the coast with the extra money I'd be making. "Can I ask you something?" he said, and his voice had this weird edge to it that made me look up from my phone. "Sure. How many people have you slept with?" I should have seen the trap right there. I should have felt the shift in the air, the way his hand had stopped moving on my ankle. But I was stupid and comfortable and thought we were past the stage where questions like that mattered. "Does it matter?" I said, smiling, trying to keep it light. "I just want to know. I told you mine. We've never talked about yours." He had told me his. 6 months into our relationship, unprompted, he'd mentioned he'd been with 4 people before me. I hadn't asked. I hadn't cared. It genuinely didn't matter to me because I'm not insecure like that, or at least I thought I wasn't. I thought it was mature and evolved not to obsess over your partner's past. Honestly, Jake, I don't think it's important. We're together now. The past is the past. That's when his whole energy changed. He pulled his hand away from my ankle, sat up straighter. "So it's a lot then." "I didn't say that. You're being defensive, which means it's high enough that you're embarrassed about it." I felt this flush of irritation. "I'm not embarrassed. I just don't think it's relevant to us or our relationship." "Why does it matter?" "Because I want to know who I'm with," he said, and his voice had gone cold in a way I'd never heard before. "I want to know if you're the kind of person who treats sex casually, or if it means something to you." And there it was, the judgment hiding behind the question. I sat up then, pulling my feet away from him. "The number doesn't tell you that. You've known me for 2 years. You know how I treat sex, how I treat you, how I treat our relationship. Just tell me the number." No. The fight that followed lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of him pushing, me refusing, him accusing me of hiding something shameful, me insisting it was a matter of principle. He said I was being difficult. I said he was being insecure. He said if I had nothing to hide, I should just tell him. I said if he really trusted me, he wouldn't need to know. "You know what I think?" he finally said, standing up, pacing his living room. "I think it's high. I think it's really high, and you know I'll judge you for it, and that's why you won't tell me." "You're already judging me," I shouted back. You're judging me for not answering, which is just as bad as if I told you a number you didn't like. There's no winning here. There would be if you were just honest with me. That word, honest, like I was lying by having boundaries. Like privacy was the same as deception. I left that night without answering him, drove home crying, called my best friend Melissa at midnight, and told her everything. She was on my side immediately. He has no right to demand that, she said. Your past is your past. He's being a controlling asshole. I wanted to believe her. I did believe her. But I also couldn't stop thinking about the look on Jake's face, the genuine hurt I'd seen there under the anger. He texted me the next morning. I'm sorry about last night. Can we talk? We met for coffee. He apologized for pushing, said he'd been thinking about it all night, and realized he was being unfair. You're right, he said, reaching across the table for my hand. Your past doesn't define you. I was being insecure and weird, and I'm sorry. I should have accepted the apology and moved on. But something in me needed him to really understand. It's not that the number is particularly high or low, I said. It's that the number doesn't tell you anything meaningful about who I am. I could say 5 or 15 or 50, and none of those numbers would tell you how I felt about those experiences, or what they meant to me, or what kind of partner I am to you. I get it, he said. I do. You're right. And I need you to understand that me not wanting to share that information doesn't mean I'm hiding something shameful. It means I'm drawing a boundary about what I think is relevant to our relationship. I understand. Really, I was out of line. We left the coffee shop holding hands. Had sex that afternoon that felt like reunion sex, intense and reassuring. I thought we'd move past it, but something had shifted, and I felt it even though I couldn't name it yet. Jake got quieter over the next few days, more distant. He'd look at me sometimes with this expression I couldn't read, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. When I asked if he was okay, he'd say he was fine, just stressed about work. Then came the night, 3 days after our fight, when everything broke open in a new way. We were at dinner with his friends, this group of guys he'd known since college. I'd met them before, liked them well enough, though they had that burly energy that sometimes grated on me. We were at some sports bar, wings and beer, a basketball game on in the background that none of us were really watching. One of his friends, Marcus, was talking about his recent breakup. She was crazy, he said, which is what guys always say. So jealous, constantly going through my phone, accusing me of stuff. That's why you don't date insecure girls, another friend, Devin, said. Secure women don't pull that shit. I felt Jake's hand tighten on my thigh under the table. Yeah, but how do you know if a girl's secure? Marcus asked. Like, what are the signs? And this is where Jake spoke up. This is the part that I replay over and over, trying to understand how the person I loved could say what he said next. I think it's about consistency, Jake said, his voice casual, like he was discussing basketball stats. Like, does she have consistent values about stuff? Or does she just apply rules when they benefit her? What do you mean? Devin asked. Like, I don't know. Jake's hand was still on my thigh, squeezing now, possessive. Say a girl tells you that your past doesn't matter, right? She's all evolved and mature about it. But then she expects you to be emotionally available and vulnerable and share all your feelings. You can't have it both ways. Either privacy matters or it doesn't. Either the past matters or it doesn't. I felt like I'd been slacked. He was talking about me, right there, in front of his friends, disguising our private fight as hypothetical conversation. I mean, I think that's different though, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Emotional availability in a current relationship is different from sexual history before the relationship existed. Jake turned to look at me, and his smile was so cold, it made my stomach drop. Is it though? Aren't they both just information about who you are as a person? Sexual history is about experiences you had before you even knew your partner existed. Emotional availability is about how you show up in the relationship itself. But both are about vulnerability, he pressed. Both are about being willing to be fully known by your partner. Marcus was looking between us, clearly sensing the tension. Are you guys talking about something specific or? No, I said quickly. Yes, Jake said at the same time. We had a disagreement about this recently. I wanted to know something about her past, and she said it didn't matter. But she expects me to share my feelings about everything. I wanted to disappear. Actually disappear. Like dissolve into the sticky floor of that sports bar. His friends were all looking at me now, and I could see the judgment forming. I mean, that does seem kind of hypocritical, Devin said slowly. It's not the same thing. I said, but my voice sounded defensive even to my own ears. Isn't it? Jake said again, and squeezed my thigh harder. If you get to say some things don't matter, why don't I get to say the same thing? I couldn't breathe right. The conversation moved on. Someone changed the subject to work or sports or something. But I sat there feeling like Jake had just exposed me to his friends, humiliated me, weaponized our private conflict for public point scoring. In the Uber home, I confronted him. What the fuck was that? What was what? You know what, bringing up our fight in front of your friends, making me look bad. I was just having a conversation. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. You set me up. You framed the whole thing to make me sound like a hypocrite. He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the passing streetlights. Then he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Maybe because you are one. Excuse me? You want me to be emotionally open with you. You want me to share my feelings, be vulnerable, tell you when I'm scared or insecure or upset. But you won't extend me the same courtesy about your past. That's not the same thing, Jake. Those are not equivalent requests. They are to me, he said. And you know what? If you get to decide that your body count doesn't matter, then I get to decide my feelings don't matter either. How about that? How about I just stop sharing anything emotional with you, and we see how you like it when someone walls off a part of themselves and calls it boundaries? I stared at him, this person I thought I knew. Are you seriously going to emotionally shut me out because I won't tell you how many people I've slept with? I'm just following your logic, he said. Privacy matters, right? Some things don't need to be shared. The past is the past. Well, my feelings are in the past the second I have them. So they don't matter either. We didn't talk the rest of the ride home. I slept at my apartment that night, and the next day, and the next. We texted, brief and polite, but something had broken between us that felt irreparable. Melissa said I should break up with him. He's being manipulative, she insisted. Punishing you for having a boundary, that's toxic as hell. But I kept thinking about what he'd said, turning it over in my mind like a Rubik's Cube I couldn't solve. Was I being hypocritical? I did want emotional intimacy from him. I did expect him to share his feelings, to be open with me about his fears and insecurities. Was it fair to demand that, while refusing to share something he clearly cared about knowing? I talked to my sister about it. She was less sympathetic than Melissa. I mean, I kind of see his point, she said. If you don't want to tell him, that's your right. But he's also allowed to have feelings about that choice. But he's weaponizing those feelings, I said. He's threatening to shut down emotionally to punish me. Or maybe he's genuinely hurt and pulling back to protect himself. I didn't want to believe that. I wanted Jake to be clearly wrong so I could be clearly right. But the doubt crept in anyway, whispering that maybe I was being unfair. Maybe I was holding a double standard. Maybe I was the problem. A week after the dinner with his friends, Jake asked to meet. We went to the park near his apartment, walked the loop trail we'd walked a dozen times before. He seemed calmer, more like himself. "I've been thinking a lot," he said, "and I want to try to explain where I'm coming from without it turning into a fight. Okay, when I asked you about your past, it wasn't because I think a number defines you. I know it doesn't. But I felt like there was this whole part of your life, this whole history of experiences and choices and feelings, that you weren't willing to share with me. And that hurt. It made me feel like you didn't trust me enough to be vulnerable with me about something that clearly makes you uncomfortable to talk about." "It doesn't make me uncomfortable," I said. "I just think it's irrelevant." "But that's the thing. You decided it was irrelevant. You made that choice unilaterally for both of us. And when I tried to tell you it felt relevant to me, you dismissed my feelings." I stopped walking. "I didn't dismiss your feelings. I just disagreed that you were entitled to that information. And I'm saying that in a relationship, when something matters to one person, it should matter to both people. Even if it's just because it matters to your partner." There was a logic to what he was saying that made me feel trapped. So I'm supposed to share anything you want to know just because you want to know it? Where do boundaries exist in that framework? I'm not saying you have no right to boundaries. I'm saying this particular boundary feels like a wall to me, and when you won't even consider my perspective, when you just shut down the conversation entirely, it makes me feel like you don't value my emotional needs. We circled around it for another hour. By the end, I was exhausted and confused, and starting to wonder if I was being stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. He walked me to my car, kissed my forehead, said, "Just think about it, okay? Think about whether this boundary is really worth what it's costing us." That night, I almost told him. I got as far as typing out a text. "It's 17. I've slept with 17 people. Does that change anything?" But I couldn't send it, because it felt like giving in to emotional manipulation. Because even if I told him, I couldn't unknow that he'd pressured me into it. Because the number would always carry this taint of coercion. Instead, I deleted the text and made a different decision. I decided to double down, to really commit to my principle. If my body count didn't matter, then I needed to act like it didn't matter. I needed to stop letting Jake make me feel guilty about having a boundary. So I texted him, "I thought about it. And my answer is still no. I'm not sharing that information. Not because the number is high or low or anything in between, but because I genuinely don't believe it's relevant to who I am as your partner. If you can't accept that, then maybe we're not compatible." He didn't respond for 6 hours. When he did, it was just, "Okay, if that's how you feel." The emotional shutdown started immediately. Jake didn't break up with me, but he stopped being present. He'd answer texts, but wouldn't initiate conversations. When we hung out, he was polite but distant. The intimacy drained out of our relationship like water from a cracked glass, slow but steady. When I asked him what was wrong, he'd say, "Nothing, I'm fine." When I pushed, he'd say, "I told you. If your feelings don't have to matter to you, then my feelings don't have to matter to me either." It was maddening. I'd try to talk to him about his day, and he'd give me one-word answers. I'd ask how he was feeling about a stressful project at work, and he'd say, "I'm handling it." I'd try to initiate deeper conversations about us, our future, our relationship, and he'd change the subject or say we were fine. "This is emotional abuse," Melissa said when I described what was happening. "He's stonewalling you, punishing you." But when I confronted Jake about it, he turned it back on me. "I'm just respecting your philosophy. You said some things don't need to be shared. You said the past doesn't matter. Well, my feelings are in the past the second I feel them, so why would I need to tell you about them?" "That's not the same thing." "Why not? Explain to me how it's different." And I couldn't. Not in a way that didn't sound hypocritical. Not in a way that didn't prove his point. I started to crack. The person I loved was turning into a stranger. And it was because of a principle I'd staked out so firmly, I didn't know how to back down without losing myself. I'd wake up at night next to him, watch him sleep, and feel like I was lying next to someone I didn't know anymore. My therapist, back when I could still afford her, asked me why I was so committed to not sharing the information. Because it's the principle, I said. Because if I give in now, it means he was right to pressure me. It means I should surrender my boundaries whenever someone makes me feel bad about having them. Is that the only reason? I thought about it. I guess I'm also afraid that if I tell him, he'll judge me. He'll see me differently. The number is 17, and I know that's more than he expected, and I know he'll have thoughts about it. So you're protecting yourself from his judgment. Yes, obviously. But by protecting yourself, you're losing the relationship anyway. She was right, but I hated that she was right. I was losing Jake day by day, watching him slip away, and my principle felt increasingly like cold comfort. 2 months into the shutdown, we went to his company holiday party. I wore the dress he'd always loved, did my makeup, tried to feel like we were still a couple, instead of two people going through the motions. At the party, he introduced me to his coworkers, kept his hand on my back, played the part of the attentive boyfriend, but it all felt hollow, performative. On the drive home, I asked, "Are we okay? Are we going to be okay?" "I don't know," he said, eyes on the road. "Are we? I want us to be." "Then give me what I've asked for." "I can't." "Then I can't give you what you're asking for either." We broke up 2 weeks later. Or rather, I broke up with him because I couldn't stand the limbo anymore. He took it calmly, almost like he'd been expecting it. Helped me pack up my stuff from his apartment, hugged me goodbye, said he hoped I'd be happy. I tried for 3 days straight, called in sick to work, let Melissa bring me ice cream and tell me I'd done the right thing, that I'd stood up for myself, that I deserved someone who respected my boundaries. But I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt like I'd lost everything over a principle I couldn't even fully articulate anymore. Then, 3 weeks after the breakup, Jake posted on Reddit. I didn't see it at first. Melissa sent it to me with a message, "You need to see this." It was in a relationship advice subreddit, and the title was, "Girlfriend refused to tell me her body count. Said it didn't matter. Now expects me to share my feelings. Double standard?" He'd laid out our entire conflict, every argument, every detail. Of course, he'd framed it his way, made himself sound reasonable and me sound hypocritical. The comments were brutal. Hundreds of people calling me manipulative, a hypocrite, telling him he dodged a bullet, speculating that my body count must be in the triple digits if I was that defensive about it. I felt violated, exposed. We'd agreed after the breakup not to trash each other to mutual friends, to keep things private and respectful. And here he was, spilling everything to thousands of strangers, letting them eviscerate me. I called him. "Are you fucking serious right now?" "What? Reddit? You posted our entire relationship on Reddit?" "I didn't use your name. No one knows it's you." "I know it's me, and you made me sound terrible. You framed everything to make yourself look good." I told the truth. "You told your version of the truth. You left out all the parts that made you look bad." "Like what?" "Like how you humiliated me in front of your friends. Like how you emotionally shut me out for months as punishment for having a boundary." "I didn't shut you out. I just applied your logic to my own behavior." I wanted to scream. "You know what, Jake? Fuck you. Enjoy your internet validation from a bunch of strangers who don't know either of us." I hung up before he could respond, spent the next hour reading through the comments, each one a little knife twist. People saying I clearly had something to hide. People saying my body count was probably sky high. People calling me every misogynistic name in the book, while insisting they weren't being misogynistic. They were just calling out my hypocrisy. A few people defended me. A handful of comments said Jake sounded controlling, that I had a right to privacy about my past. But they were drowned out by the chorus of condemnation. I made a burner account and posted my side of the story in a different subreddit. Explained how Jake had pressured me, how he'd used emotional withdrawal as punishment, how he'd violated my privacy by posting about us online. The responses were more sympathetic, but also kind of patronizing. A lot of, "You both sound toxic, and this relationship was doomed anyway." Melissa said I should just ignore it. That Reddit didn't matter, that strangers' opinions didn't matter, but it did matter. Because Jake had shaped the narrative, and now hundreds of people thought I was the villain. I tried to move on. Went on a few dates that went nowhere. Threw myself into work. Started running again, something I'd let lapse during the relationship. Slowly, painfully, I began to build a life that didn't have Jake-shaped hole in it. Then, 2 months after the breakup, I got a weird message on Instagram. It was from a girl I didn't know. Early 20s. Pretty. Her profile full of carefully curated photos. "Hey, I hope this isn't weird, but I'm seeing your ex Jake. We've been dating for about a month. He mentioned he had a bad breakup, and I found his Reddit post about it. I just wanted to reach out because some things he's been saying don't quite add up, and I wanted to get your perspective." My heart started racing. I stared at the message for a full minute before responding. "What kinds of things?" She sent a long message explaining that Jake had told her I'd cheated on him, that I'd had a high body count and was defensive about it because I'd been sleeping around during our relationship, that he'd broken up with me when he found out. "But that doesn't match what his Reddit post said," she wrote. "In that post, he made it sound like you broke up over a disagreement about boundaries. He didn't mention cheating at all. And when I asked him about the discrepancy, he got really defensive and said the Reddit post was an oversimplification. I felt sick. I never cheated on him. Not once. That's a complete lie." We moved the conversation to DMs, then to a phone call. Her name was Sophie, and she was sweet and earnest and way too young to be dealing with Jake's bullshit. I told her everything. The fight about body count, the emotional shutdown, the Reddit post. I even told her the number, 17. Because at this point, what did it matter? "That's it?" she said. "That's what he was so worked up about? I slept with more people than that." "Did he ask you about your body count?" "In the first week we were dating, I told him 12. And he seemed fine with it. A little surprised I was so open about it, but fine." Something cold settled in my stomach. "He asked you in the first week?" "Yeah. We were talking about past relationships, and it came up naturally. He said he'd been with 4 people, and asked about me. It was pretty casual. 4 people. The same number he'd told me. But if we'd broken up 4 months ago, and he'd been dating Sophie for a month, that meant, Sophie, has he slept with anyone between me and you? Like, during the breakup period?" There was a pause. "He mentioned a few hookups. Why?" "How many?" "I don't know. Exactly. He made it sound like a few, like he was dealing with the breakup by being casual with people for a while. Why does it matter?" "Because it meant he was lying to her the same way he might have lied to me. Because his number wasn't frozen at 4. Because the body count he'd been so judgmental about me, refusing to share was something he apparently misrepresented about himself." I didn't tell Sophie that theory. I didn't want to plant ideas. Instead, I just said, "I think you should be careful. Jake was really manipulative with me, and I'd hate to see him do the same thing to you." She thanked me for talking to her, said she'd think about what I'd said. We ended the call, and I sat there feeling like I'd just glimpsed something ugly beneath the surface of my entire relationship. The next day, Sophie messaged me again. I asked him point blank how many people he's been with total, including after you. He said 7. But when I asked him to break that down, he got really cagey. Said he didn't want to talk about his past because it didn't matter. I said that was fine, but I just wanted to understand the timeline. He basically shut down the conversation. 7. which meant he'd been with 3 people in the 4 months since our breakup. Or maybe more than that. And he was lying to Sophie the way he might have lied to me. I think he's hiding something, Sophie wrote, and the way he's acting about it is exactly what he described you doing. He won't give details, says the past doesn't matter, gets defensive when I push. But he told me you were a hypocrite for doing the same thing. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like this proved I'd been right all along. But instead, I just felt tired and sad and like I'd wasted 2 years of my life on someone I never really knew. Sophie broke up with Jake a week later. She told him it was because of the lying about his past and the discrepancies in his story about me. He apparently tried to flip it back on her, said she was being jealous and insecure, that his past didn't matter. She sent me screenshots of the breakup texts. In them, Jake said almost verbatim the things I'd said to him during our fights, about boundaries, about privacy, about the past being irrelevant. Seeing my own arguments in his words, deployed for his own protection, after he'd vilified me for using them, made me want to throw my phone across the room. I'm sorry you had to deal with this too, Sophie wrote. You were right about him. But I didn't feel right. I felt confused and angry, and like I'd been gaslit for months about who was the reasonable one in our conflict. I texted Jake. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help myself. Sophie told me about your breakup. Interesting how the past suddenly doesn't matter when it's your past you're hiding. He responded an hour later. I don't know what she told you, but she's twisting things. I wasn't hiding anything. I just didn't think it was relevant. That's exactly what I said to you. But when I said it, you called me a hypocrite and emotionally shut me out for months. That was different. How? Explain to me how it's different. He didn't respond. I sent another text. You told her I cheated on you. That's a fucking lie, and you know it. I never said you cheated. I said we broke up because of trust issues around your past. She must have misunderstood. Bullshit. You lied about me to make yourself look better. Just like you lied on Reddit. Just like you've apparently been lying to her about your own body count. My body count is my business. But mine wasn't? My privacy didn't matter, but yours does? You're twisting this. I'm seeing it clearly for the first time. You're a hypocrite, Jake. You held me to a standard you had no intention of meeting yourself. He stopped responding after that. Blocked me, I think, because my texts stopped delivering. Melissa, when I told her everything, was less sympathetic than I expected. I mean, you guys both sound exhausting, honestly. He was definitely a hypocrite. But also, would it have killed you to just tell him the number? Like, I know it's the principle of the thing, but you lost a 2-year relationship over it. He lost the relationship. I corrected. He's the one who emotionally shut down. Because you wouldn't answer a question. I'm not saying he was right, but I'm also not sure you were entirely right either. I wanted to argue, but I was so tired of arguing. Tired of defending myself. Tired of trying to figure out who was the villain and who was the victim in a story that probably didn't have clear heroes or villains. My sister was more direct. You guys were both being stubborn assholes. He shouldn't have pressured you, and you shouldn't have dug in so hard over something that clearly mattered to him. Sometimes being right isn't worth being alone. But here's the thing they didn't understand. The thing I'm still trying to process. It wasn't about the number. It was never about the number. It was about the fact that Jake made me feel like my boundary was unreasonable, while claiming the exact same boundary for himself. It was about how he weaponized my words against me after punishing me for saying them. It was about the lying, the manipulation, the way he convinced me I was the problem when he was doing the exact same thing he condemned me for. And yeah, maybe I was stubborn. Maybe I should have just told him and avoided all of this. But the more I think about it, the more I think he would have found something else to be weird about. Because it wasn't really about knowing my body count. It was about control. About breaking down my boundaries until I had none left. about making me feel like my standards for privacy were unreasonable while his were totally justified. I found his Reddit post again a few weeks ago, months after everything imploded. Someone had commented recently, tagging him, "Update, did you guys work it out?" He'd responded, "We broke up. Turns out she was exactly who I thought she was. Dodged a bullet." Reading that made me angrier than anything else he'd done, because in his mind, he was still the victim. Still the reasonable one who'd been wronged by his hypocritical girlfriend. He'd learned nothing, taken no accountability. Just moved on to the next girl with the same patterns, the same manipulations, the same lies. I made peace with never getting closure from Jake, but I wrote my own Reddit post, finally, a few days ago. Laid out everything, including the stuff with Sophie, including his hypocrisy, including the lies. I didn't tag his post or mention his username, but I linked to the general situation so people could find the connection if they wanted. The responses have been mixed. Some people say we both sound toxic. Some say he was abusive and manipulative. Some say I should have just answered the question. A few people have messaged me privately to say they experienced something similar with a partner who held them to standards the partner didn't meet themselves. One message stood out. It was from a guy who said, "I used to be like your ex. I'd grill girlfriends about their pasts, get weird about their body counts, make them feel bad for having boundaries. Then I'd hide my own shit and call it privacy. It took years of therapy to realize I was projecting my insecurities onto them and punishing them for making me feel inadequate. Your ex probably won't figure it out without serious help, and even then, maybe not. Just wanted you to know it wasn't about you. It was always about him." That helped, weirdly. The idea that Jake's behavior was about his own issues, not about anything I did or didn't do. That I could have been a different person with a different past, and he still would have found something to fixate on. Some boundary to violate. Some way to make me feel like I was the problem. I'm still single. Still processing. Still sometimes wondering if I should have just told him the damn number and saved myself all this pain. But then I remember how he used my words against me. How he lied about me to Sophie. How he posted our private conflict online for validation. And I think, no, I'm glad I held that boundary. Not because 17 is a small or large number. Not because I had something to hide, but because giving in to his pressure wouldn't have saved the relationship. It would have just taught him that he could steamroll my boundaries whenever he wanted. The worst part, the part that keeps me up at night, isn't the breakup or the Reddit posts or even the lies. It's that I still sometimes miss him. Miss the version of him that existed before that question, before everything got twisted and ugly. I miss the Jake who rubbed my feet while we watched documentaries, who celebrated my promotion like it was his own success, who made me feel loved and safe and seen. But that Jake might have never really existed. Or maybe he existed, but only conditionally. Only as long as I was the version of myself he wanted me to be. The second I asserted a boundary he didn't like, he became someone else. Someone cold and punishing and willing to hurt me to make a point. My therapist, in our last session before I couldn't afford her anymore, asked me what I learned from the relationship. I said that I can't trust anyone completely, that vulnerability is a weapon people use against you, that even good relationships can rot from the inside when someone decides they need control more than they need connection. She looked sad when I said that. I hope that's not the only lesson you take from this. But I don't know what other lesson there is. I stood up for myself, held a boundary, refused to be pressured into sharing something I didn't want to share, and I lost the relationship, got dragged online, had lies spread about me, and watched my ex move on like I never mattered. If I could go back and do it differently, I don't even know what I'd change. Tell him the number? Maybe we would have lasted longer, but eventually he would have found something else to control. Refuse to answer, but break up sooner? Maybe I would have avoided some of the pain, but I'd still be sitting here wondering what if. The truth is, there was no winning once he asked that question. The question itself was the trap. Because it was never about information. It was about whether I'd submit to his need to know every part of me, even the parts I wanted to keep private. And when I said no, when I drew that line, it became about punishing me until I either gave in or gave up. I gave up. And he got to tell everyone I was the problem. So here I am, telling my version to whoever's willing to listen. Not because I think it'll change anything. Not because I expect vindication or sympathy or even understanding. But because I need someone to know that I'm not the person Jake described. I'm not a hypocrite or a liar or someone who cheated or had something shameful to hide. I'm just someone who wanted privacy about my past and got destroyed for it by someone who demanded transparency from me while hiding his own truth. And maybe that makes me stupid or stubborn or wrong. Maybe I should have just answered the fucking question. But I didn't, and I can't change that now. And I have to live with the consequences of choosing my boundaries over my relationship. The thing nobody tells you about standing up for yourself is that sometimes you stand alone.